Yanagihara, the forgotten valley of echoes. Deep within the mountainous interior of rural Japan, where modern roads thin into forgotten paths and telephone signals disappear between valleys, there are places that feel structurally unchanged yet socially erased. Locals rarely give them exact names. Instead, they refer to them indirectly, by old river lines, collapsed administrative boundaries, or family land that no longer legally belongs to anyone. One of these names, repeated in scattered oral accounts, abandoned forestry notes, and internet folklore, is Yanagihara. No official map confirms a single definitive location. Some researchers suggest it may have been a real valley settlement that was later absorbed into surrounding towns. Others believe it is a convergence of multiple abandoned villages that share similar histories, slow depopulation, isolation, and eventual disappearance from administrative records. But across all versions, one idea remains unchanged. Yanagihara was not destroyed. It was left behind while still intact. And that is what makes it unsettling. The valley before decline. Before any talk of abandonment, Yanagihara is described as a quiet mountain valley shaped by agriculture and seasonal survival. The geography is consistent across accounts: steep forested ridges, narrow riverbeds, and terraced rice fields carved into slopes that catch limited sunlight. Life was difficult but predictable. Families lived in wooden homes built close together for warmth and protection against mountain winds. The village operated on a rhythm defined by planting seasons, harvest cycles, and ritual observances at a small Shinto shrine hidden beneath tall cedar trees. That shrine is repeatedly mentioned in oral accounts, not as a grand religious structure, but as a modest wooden building that quietly anchored the community. Offerings were made regularly. Festivals were small but meaningful. It was less a place of worship and more a place where the village confirmed its own existence. Even in early generations, however, subtle unease appears in stories passed down through families. Some areas of the forest were avoided without explanation. Certain narrow paths were never used at night. Children were told not to enter deeper ridge trails alone. There is no written record explaining these restrictions, only inherited behavior. Over time, these small avoidances became part of everyday life. Still, for decades, nothing disrupted the village. Yanagihara existed like many other remote mountain settlements, isolated, stable, and slowly aging. The first slow break. The first visible change came during the Taisho period, when rural migration across Japan began accelerating. Younger residents started leaving Yanagihara for urban employment opportunities. At first, it was temporary. A few young men left for factory work in growing cities. Some women moved to urban households as domestic workers. But what began as movement gradually became permanent absence. The village did not collapse in a single moment. Instead, it fractured gradually. Some homes remained fully lived in while others were abandoned but left intact. Fields were partially maintained but not expanded. Paths were still walked but less frequently each year. The result was a strange unevenness. Certain parts of the village remained active while others slipped into silence, creating a sense that Yanagihara existed in multiple states at once, alive in one section, abandoned in another. This is where early descriptions of a layered silence originate. Not true emptiness, but diminishing presence spread unevenly across space. The local school reflected this shift most clearly. Enrollment dropped year after year until the remaining students were transferred to nearby towns. The school building itself was never demolished or relocated. It simply remained standing, empty, preserved, and slowly weathering. It would later become the most referenced structure in all Yanagihara accounts. War, loss, and the final human withdrawal. The 1930s to 1950s marked the most severe turning point. With wartime conscription, many men from rural villages were taken into military service. Some returned after the war. Many did not. Yanagihara, already weakened by migration, lost a significant portion of its remaining population. However, unlike villages destroyed by bombing or natural disaster, Yanagihara experienced no single catastrophic event. There are no records of evacuation, no documented destruction, no official closure. Instead, abandonment happened in an unstructured way. People stopped returning after visits to town. House maintenance gradually ceased. Agricultural cycles were no longer sustained. By the time the war ended, Yanagihara was already in an advanced state of abandonment, though physically intact. Visitors who passed through the valley in the post-war years described something unusual. The village looked as though life had paused rather than ended. Inside homes. Rice bowls were still placed on tables, hardened by time. Clothing remained folded in storage areas. Paper doors hung in place despite damage. Furniture remained positioned as if still in use. Outside. Gardens remained structured in recognizable patterns, though overgrown. Paths were still visible beneath vegetation. Stone boundaries of homes remained intact. But the most repeated accounts were auditory. Travelers reported hearing a single school bell ringing at dusk. Footsteps moving inside empty wooden buildings. Faint voices resembling children carried by wind through the valley. None of these accounts were officially verified, yet they appear repeatedly in unrelated testimonies over decades. The school that never truly closed. Among all structures in Yanagihara, the abandoned school became the center of its legend. It is consistently described as a wooden building slightly elevated from the main settlement area. Its structure remains partially intact despite long-term decay. Windows are broken irregularly. Doors hang unevenly. The roof is partially collapsed but the interior remains recognizable. Multiple accounts describe similar phenomena. At certain times of day, especially late afternoon, faint scratching or writing sounds can be heard inside empty classrooms. It resembles chalk moving slowly across a board, though no one is present. Inside classrooms, chairs are sometimes found repositioned between visits. Not destroyed or moved randomly, but arranged as if class is still ongoing. Some visitors report hearing a roll call being spoken in a calm voice, followed by faint responses that cannot be clearly identified. However, when entering the building, no source is found. The structure never shows signs of occupancy, yet consistently produces the impression of activity. House beneath the trees. Another frequently mentioned location lies at the lower edge of the valley, partially covered by vegetation and thyme. Locals and explorers refer to it as the listening house. Reports associated with this structure are consistent across different accounts. Curtains move despite sealed windows. A female voice can be heard calling from inside empty rooms. Visitors describe an unsettling sense of being observed from within the structure itself. One account repeatedly referenced in folklore describes a group of hikers entering the house and hearing a voice clearly say, "You are late." No physical explanation for the voice has ever been identified. Skeptics attribute these experiences to acoustics, wind movement through broken structures, and psychological suggestion caused by isolation. However, the consistency of phrasing across unrelated accounts keeps the story circulating. Why Yanagihara persists as a legend. Yanagihara is not unique in a physical sense. Many rural Japanese villages experienced similar decline due to urban migration and demographic change. Entire regions of mountain settlements were gradually emptied during the 20th century. What distinguishes Yanagihara is not confirmed supernatural activity, but the combination of conditions that shape perception. Abandoned but intact architecture. Dense forest environments that amplify sound reflection. Long-term absence of human presence without destruction. Cultural frameworks that interpret absence as presence. In Japanese tradition, places are not always considered empty simply because people leave them. The concept of lingering presence, emotional, spiritual, or symbolic, is deeply embedded in cultural storytelling. In such environments, natural sounds become interpretable as human activity. Wood expansion becomes footsteps. Wind through broken structures becomes speech. Echoes become memory. Over time, interpretation replaces observation, and observation becomes story. Modern reinterpretation. In recent decades, Yanagihara has evolved from rural folklore into internet-based urban legend. Its name appears in online discussions, exploration videos, and speculative mapping attempts. However, no confirmed location has ever been verified as the Yanagihara. Instead, multiple abandoned villages across Japan are often grouped under the same conceptual identity. As a result, Yanagihara now functions less as a geographical point and more as a symbolic label representing abandoned rural Japan itself. It has become a narrative space rather than a physical one. Final interpretation. The most grounded explanation suggests that Yanagihara may never have been a single village in the way it is described in legend. Instead, it may be a convergence of multiple abandoned settlements, unified through repeated storytelling, shared cultural memory, and the psychological impact of rural decline. Over time, these fragmented histories merged into a single identity, Yanagihara, a name used to describe places where human life quietly withdrew without destruction. Closing scene. If you stand in such a valley at dusk, the environment does not feel empty in a conventional sense. It feels paused. Wind passes through broken wooden beams. Grass grows through collapsed floorboards. The sky darkens earlier than expected beneath the mountains. And somewhere in the distance, beyond visibility and sound, there is always a lingering impression. The place is not waiting to be discovered. It is waiting to be remembered. Because in Yanagihara, according to every version of the story, abandonment was never the end. It was only the beginning of listening.